Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'd like to talk today about some of the basic assumptions or underlying features of radicalization and de-radicalization. It will be a little bit of a theoretical and conceptual work and presentation, but my hope is that we will have time to for questions, for maybe fleshing out some of the more abstract points which I'm going to make in a minute. My presentation will revolve around concept of radicalization and how theoretically we may understand its basic contours and its basic frameworks. And if time allows, I'd like also to talk a little bit about de-radicalization, how we can talk and perceive. Of course, the concept of radicalization is highly contested. Some of the scholars are even saying that it's actually misguiding to focus on one-dimensional studies such as radicalization and de-radicalization. But my hunch, my guess, and my work is that it's nonetheless still important, not least because of the recent events in many parts of the world. Of course, there are different types of radicalization, but let's start with the definition of radicalization. Radicalization, or violent radicalization, as I'd like to call it, is defined, or I define it as supporting or perpetrating into the acts of violence which aim to bring permanent changes to society by threatening the existing order or political structure. So the basic aspect of that definition is supporting acts of violence or either ideologically or physically being into it with an aim to changing the mainstream aspects of society and political structure. Obviously, it's for sure almost that this definition brings to mind so many other questions rather than clears out the way for a better understanding. I accept that, but that doesn't mean that we should we should turn a blind eye to the concept itself. The concept itself has its problems, such as immediately we talk about the concept of radicalization, we should consider this question: radicalization in relation to what? What kind of radicalization is considered as threatening? And why is it the case that people or states are obsessed with this idea, whereas it's in the fabric of so many different historical transformations, French Revolution, experience of the state formation in so different parts of the world. Revolution itself is a radicalization process. So having accepted that, we should keep in mind that this definition bears into it a bias, a liberal bias, which is to say that values of liberal democracy, freedom of speech are always, almost always contested within or outside of its framework. So having defined it in this way, we should also proceed with another concept, which is a radical individual. A radical individual is the one who profoundly in the business of or desires a radical sociopolitical change in the context he or she lives. There are obviously two types of radicalization: cognitive radicalization and behavioral radicalization. And in the literature, these two are fiercely contested. Some people believe that it is the focus should be on the cognitive radicalization. Others, as I will try to explain in a minute, claim and believe that the opposite is true, which says that it should be the behavioral radicalization which we should keep an eye. In one way or another, under the basic contours of the definitional framework that I have just given, I'd like to proceed with some of the theoretical approaches to radicalization. There are obviously so many different approaches in the literature, but my take on it is that I think we can boil it down to 4 or 5 main approaches. The first one we may start with is sociological approach to radicalization. Sociological approach to radicalization focus on economic, social, political marginalization in a given society, how individuals live, how an individual lives through and goes through an experience of marginalization, how a lack of education, how the experience of living in a subculture or a counterculture contributes to the process of radicalization. For example, if the question is a radical Muslim living in a European capital, the question, a sociological approach, would be the one which posits the question of how this individual is subject to hyper-secularization through institutional or ideological mechanisms in his or her society. Racism, discrimination, isolation, all these major macro sociological factors contribute to the radicalization of the individual. Obviously, there are other approaches, as I have said. The other one is a psychological approach, which will discard sociological factors in explaining how individuals get radicalized, and the proponents of this approach would be to suggest, their position would be to suggest that we should give importance to personal motivations rather than sociological motivations. And here personal motivations include a wide range from revenge seeking to status seeking. And of course, because it's psychological, it's very difficult to come up with a pattern of radicalization within this scholarship, because psychological factors have a lot to say about individual differentiations from one case to another. So it's very difficult within this approach to come up with a general explanatory framework. Here, for example, an individual may seek revenge, may want revenge, and he or she may find out a way to funnel his or her anger towards leaders of his or her society or outside societies. If he or she seeks or wants status or prestige or reputation, he or she may join in those radical groups not with an idea of correcting the wrongs of societal interaction, but more satisfying his or her needs. So briefly, let me also go through other approaches. Another one is social network approach, which is another way to understand radicalization. It's a little bit more dynamic form of explanation than sociological and even psychological explanations. Its basic thrust is to suggest that individual gets radicalized when he or she becomes or gets into a small network of people. So intra-group social pressure, friendship, solidarity, indoctrination, and all of the rest of it would be basic factors behind radicalization. So here in this module, what is important is to focus on the relationship within that small group network structures, rather than focus on individual psychological or more sociological macro factors. Here the question here is who you know rather than what you believe. You know, what kind of interactions, what kind of personal linkages you have, and so on and so forth. It's not a top-down, but rather a bottom-up explanation to radicalization. Here, individuals use their personal connections or kinship, and more or less they're much more freer in their planning, in their action, and so on. So, same age groupings, sharing same place, and living within the same sociological, small cultural fabric would contribute to the radicalization. Of course, the form changes according to many cases. Another explanation or another approach is framing approach or problem definition approach. This approach believes that or posits that neither sociological nor psychological nor social network approach is in itself satisfactory when it comes to explain why people get radicalized. Here, what is important is to inquire into how individuals frame and are exposed to framing of problems. So here, the communication style, language, discourse are much more important than either macro-sociological factors or micro-psychological factors. Here, what is important is to look at how problems are framed. Obviously, the context may change. You can frame, or it would be, for example, it would be much more influential if you frame the problem within a small social network, influential small social network, than say in a school. So the place, timing, the context are all important for communicating. But here, the main aspect of radicalization is communication, is how you frame the problem. For example, so if there is a framing, what we call framing harmony between the individual, the target, and the host, then radicalization gets much more easier. Here, obviously, grievances, angers, economic hardship are all integrated within communication. But those factors are not in themselves determining the basic aspect of radicalization. What is determining the basic aspect of radicalization is how you frame those problems. If you connect them within the life experience of the individual, his or her individual biography, past experiences, and so on and so forth, if you can do that, then those factors, those sociological factors, become much more important. Analogies, metaphors are all in the game here. How individual conceptualizes his or her place in society is important. How he or she explain his position or her position is important. Obviously, those four basic approaches are all in themselves important. And, a common sense approach or common sense would tell us that the right answer, lies in a mixture or a combination of all those four factors. But unfortunately, it's not easy to do that, not because of empirical reasons, but also because of theoretical reasons. Once you focus on social network approach, it means that psychological factors or sociological factors must take a backseat in your explanation. Or else, if you focus on, for example, problem definition rather than social network, then it means that it is the communication or the discourses or the kind of grammar which is used within a society which is important. whether society, social group is small or big. So there are internal barriers or obstacles in having a kind of a mixed approach. I'd like to say a couple of words also about de-radicalization. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll keep it short. De-radicalization is also related to the very efforts to understand what radicalization means. So if you approach the issue from a sociological perspective, obviously, the kind of menu you come up with will differ from the moment when you take sociological, not sociological, but psychological factors. Or if you take social network approach in understanding why people get radicalized, obviously your understanding of de-radicalization will change accordingly. So the first step for de-radicalization is to understand what kind of approach is taken up by the agency or the society or the political group. The second one is to also make a distinction between two different sort of concepts, which I have explained at the beginning of my presentation: cognitive radicalization and behavioral radicalization. So here we have two main approaches: the Anglo-Saxon approach and the European, if you like, approach. The Anglo-Saxon approach talks or focus on behavioral radicalization and claims that to de-radicalize individual, we should first look at how people are getting involved in the pathways to extreme behavior, not extreme ideas. Whereas in the European approach, what is important is not necessarily the behavior or not the endpoint or the action, but the belief system, the belief structures, extreme views. Okay, so it's very important in this view, the European view, to focus on how individuals would be distracted, would be prevented from getting into those radicalized ideologies, belief systems, extreme systems. Whereas in the Anglo-Saxon or American system, if you like, because emphasis is on the behavior, action, act, it's almost a taboo to question the extreme views of the individual. That area is almost an untouchable area. You can't just, go into an with obviously good intention to probe into the individual's views, ideas, lest be extreme. So there is no such option in the Anglo-Saxon system. So end result is that you prevent radicalization only at the gate, if you like, whenever the action itself is committed. Here, counterterrorism policies, law enforcement policies, policing would be coming to the fore. Whereas in the European approach, because the emphasis is more on the cognitive rather than behavioral radicalization, de-radicalization is thought to be related to alternative community building, distraction of the individuals from extreme views, preventing them from getting exposed to radical ideologies, be it Islamic, leftist, or whatever. So it's very important to, here in this approach, to get involved before individual gets into action. Okay? Here, it's one step before the action. Obviously, each approaches have downsides and benefits. For example, in the American approach, as I said, internal thinking process of an individual is all, is a no-go area. You can't just, in the name of law or in the name of preventing radicalization, you get involved into what this individual thinks. But in the European case, it's more open to such actions, as I said, democracy building, providing sufficient incentives for individuals to respect and value freedom of speech, even if that would counter or conflict their own. And obviously infringements of individual civil rights in the European case is much more possible than the American or Anglo-Saxon case. So the results of those approaches to de-radicalization, of course, differ in different geographies in different parts of the world. To sum up, I'm getting to the conclusion. I think, given the latest events, it is obvious that neither the European nor Anglo-Saxon approaches to de-radicalization is sufficient or is satisfactory for the either law enforcement or for politicians to find a way forward. Not least because individuals are clever enough to find alternative ways to escape from those either Anglo-Saxon ways of preventing radicalization or European ones. So instead of finding or attaching or compartmentalizing one approach as opposed to other, I think a better one should be to focus on cases, specific cases, and be sensitive to the local, individual contexts rather than having a general framework before getting involved in this approach. That's the kind of de-radicalization policy that I'm sort of promoting here would obviously, of course, would be much more difficult to follow. But given the latest events of European terror acts, I think we don't have any other options because increasingly those individuals, radicalized individuals, are sophisticated, both hiding their real intentions and also plans. So intentions and planning are two areas where neither Anglo-Saxon nor European approaches find a way to deal with. Maybe we will have some more time to, open up what I have just said in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this kind of theoretical introduction. It was very fruitful. Our second speaker is Floran Kehaja. He is the Executive Director of Kosova's Center for Security Studies. He served previously in the position of Head of Operations between 2008 and 2011. He has been an assistant lecturer at various universities in Kosovo. Florin is author of several scientific publications in security field, as well as author and co-author of local international publications regarding the field of security, rule of law, and regional cooperation. He is an international consultant on security sector reform, rule of law, and good governance, cooperating with leading international governmental and non-governmental organizations. He is frequently invited in the prestigious research events in the capacity of Kosovo Center for Security Studies or senior researcher in the related field. During the period of time 2005 and 2007, he has worked at the International Relations Office of the University of Pristina in the position of coordinator of the International Summer University of Pristina. He is going to talk about the experience of Western Balkans. His presentation title is State of Play of Violent Extremism in the Western Balkans, Experience in Prevention and Disengagement. So, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Murat. It's my great pleasure to be here in Istanbul and to be speaking on a topic which is of our joint concern. Actually, we strongly believe, and my impression is that there is a very good cooperation between Kosovo and Turkey in all levels, and perhaps even in the academic level, but I think it's essential that we touch upon the topics of our joint concern, and we gather in the way that we have gathered today. And actually, I will touch upon the issue of the, I would call it rather violent extremism in the Western Balkans from a rather empirical perspective. And Mr. Tunçay has explained very well the conceptual aspect of the radicalization and extremism, and I agree that there are different dilemmas on how to frame the radicalization. So we, as a center, so Kosovo Center for Security Studies, we were the first think tank in the Balkans to launch a large-scale research on identifying the causes of violent extremism, not only in Kosovo, but in the Western Balkans generally, because as you know, we are talking about a small region comparing to Turkey. So everything is connected. Most of these countries were part of the former Yugoslavia, so there are basically family and relationships. So we have launched our report or research assessment on the causes of consequences of violent extremism, with a special focus on our citizens' involvement in the Middle East conflicts, namely in Syria and Iraq. So what we did is that, to explain the methodology briefly, is that we have basically scanned the situation. We wanted to identify first the problem, because this was more or less a taboo topic for the Balkans, in the sense that we have witnessed the quick widespread of the violent extremism, but one part of the society either was afraid to deal with, or the other was ignoring it. So because we were a post-conflict society, we were subject to different ways of practicing not only religion, but also to behaving in a way, be it towards the Eastern way of practicing or the West. So what we did is that we have interviewed people that returned from Syria, because Kosovo and Macedonia are small. We have interviewed people that returned from Syria and Iraq, up to 6 of them. We have interviewed families of the people that have their sons or daughters in Syria and Iraq. And we have, of course, made also the public opinion survey, because we wanted to combine both qualitative and quantitative data. Hence, we have a report, and you can find it in our website. We have found out that it's essential that if we want to identify the causes of violent extremism, and if we are going to especially try to do the prevention, or I'm not talking about de-radicalization, we need to make sure that the local organizations and the local actors are involved. What we mean by this is that in small countries like ours in the Balkans, we have huge international involvement, consultancies, the airdropping of the consultants, transplantation of the models, which somehow tries to identify the problems, but in this case we find it quite unsuccessful. So it was essential that somebody from us be involved on this, because we need to have people that speak their language. Believe me or not, it's very difficult, even from us, from the capital of Pristina, to get access to some community areas which are 50 or 60 kilometers away. I would be, for instance, be perceived the same as would be a researcher from London. So we need to make sure that we have people, not only from our local community, researchers, but researchers that do speak the language of the people that have been not recruited or affiliated by this way of practicing. When we say violent extremism, I do recognize this concept quite broad, because we have the tendency to sometimes to link it to Islam, especially in the Islamophobic circles. In Kosovo, we have 3 ways of practicing Islam. We have one part is the secular society. The other part is the part practicing Islam based on the Hanafi school of thought, which has derived from the Ottoman Empire. The other part is the conservative way of practicing Islam, which came in Kosovo recently after the conflict, but not only there. In Bosnia, for instance, it came during early 90s. And we have a small group of people that derives from the conservatives that have the potential to use force. This is how we frame. So these are the people that are violent extremists in the sense that they have the potential to use force in order to reach certain goals, be it political or social. So we were more concerned about this small group of people which have happened to be part of those that have potential to use force. Meaning that we have about 300 people only from Kosovo, or about 1,000 from the entire Western Balkans who have happened to go to Syria and Iraq. And we have about the same number who are still present in our region. So from the security perspective, we tend to see this as a problematic, and hence we have identified this. So to make a long story short, and in the conceptual part, we have endorsed the recent conceptual shift, which tend to promote more countering violent extremism as a concept rather than anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism concept, which we have found in the law enforcement efforts. Actually, until two or 3 years ago, in the Balkans, we have more efforts of counter-terrorism, which ultimately put all of the people, or even those that look differently from the other part of the society, into the terrorist shelter, if I can put it this way, without the final say of the course. So we believe that there is a need for the soft approach in terms of countering violent extremism. And when I say soft approach, I mean the efforts to first to prevent further widespread of the violent extremism towards other parts of the population. What we have identified with our research, and we still identify, is that the characteristics of the people that were subject to violent extremism in Kosovo and in other parts of the Western Balkans are young people, light-minded, mainly with the secondary schools, not all, of course. About 35% of them have criminal background, meaning that they have been attracted by the recruiters to what they have been said to have quick access to jihad and to the paradise, so they could get rid of their past. People that have very difficult conditions, economic conditions, people that are isolated in their communities, huge internet coverage, and the fact that the minority these people are very vocal in the internet, especially in the Albanian media content, namely in YouTube and social media. We have as part of our research endeavors and part of our prevention, because we were more involved in the prevention, and we are still doing this, we think that in terms of de-radicalization, this requires more efforts, and it's a different approach. We believe that by engaging with the pupils in particular, because this is the target that we have identified, at least in our region, but also with the young people generally, we can work on preventing. Because if we let these people just in the hands of unknown people, then they will be penetrated, they will be recruited, because that was the case with those that were already being subject to violent extremism. So what we concern is that in the narrative of our peoples, we can find some elements of conspiracy, saying that ISIS or Daesh or whatever we call, or Jabhat al-Nusra, they are the invention of US or Israel, and that we don't need to deal with this because this is everything constructed. And we think that this conspiracy does have effect in our prevention efforts, because people start suddenly to believe that everything that is happening is constructed into a way and is coordinated by the major powers. We think that this is problematic, because in this way people get discouraged. Another element is the battle in the social media, which we find a defeated battle, a battle that we will not be able to win, at least in the coming years. Because I have the opportunity to attend the White House Summit in New York, and somebody mentioned that there are about 90,000 tweets of containing violent extremist elements during 24 hours per day. So out of those, there are about hundreds that we have in our Albanian language. So we think that none of us have been able enough to work on this, so to make sure that we create counter-narratives. None of us, at least in the Balkans, and I can talk with the confidence, have created the counter-narratives. In one side, putting the narratives that are being created by or used, applied by the recruiters, whereas in the other side, putting the counter-narratives, because we know that even the reference to Quran and to Islamic to Islam generally has been misused, and we have identified this in close cooperation with the Islamic community. Then another problem that is hampering us in terms of countering violent extremism is the rise on the other side of the extremist seculars, what we call, because as part of the secular society there are extremist seculars who try to, what they say, countenance violent extremism by the use, but at the same time they ultimately use Islamophobic, in this case, narrative, and this creates a lot of problems, and this just activates the other part of the extremists, and hence it creates a problem for the state, for the society, for us as a think tank, academic community, in terms of contributing in this direction. So in other words, when we talk about reintegration of people that return from Syria and Iraq, we believe that the prison is not the only option that needs to be applied. We have a law now that can imprison people that return from Syria, whatever they have done, be it the combatants or the cook or the cleaner, with up to 15 years of sentence. We think that the state and the society in our region, in particular in Kosovo, needs to make sure that it has a reintegration process for those people that really want to reintegrate. Because we have found out that some of the people that happen to go to Syria, they were shocked with what they have seen there, but they had difficulties to return. Those that have returned, they want to make sure that they get reintegrated into the society, but the society does not admit them. They are marginalized, and we don't think that prison is an ultimate option. We believe that actually we have clear indication that some of the main recruiters, what we would call the head of the snakes, that are now in the prison, are just poisoning the rest of the prisoners. And we believe that with our correctional service, which is very weak, we may end up having more problem on this. Another aspect which is more Western Balkan centric, and I'm not sure whether this is related to Middle East, is the shift from extremist nationalism into extremist Islam. We think that with the departure of extremist nationalism that we had in the Balkans, people are no longer identifying their traditional enemy, and they are gradually turning into another way of extremism, which now has the flavor of religion. And because some people find quite heroic and quite decent what their fathers or grandfathers did in the past against the occupators, and now they want to find an enemy, or they want to be differentiated from the other part of the society. And we think this is a crucial problem that we need to deal with. Generally speaking, the Balkans, comparing to Turkey, I believe, has been quite late in tackling with this. We have been just recently dealing with this, not only in terms of the policy framework and in terms of the legal framework, but in terms of identifying the real problem. Because at the beginning, you had either people that have perceived this as an agenda of certain countries in the Balkans, or they have ignored it. So to sum up, we think that it is essential that there is a cooperation between academic community, civil society, Islamic community. I refer to Islamic community now in this speech because some people tend to say that why you are saying violent extremism is about Islamic. Actually, no, we don't identify this as a violent extremism as religion-based. We have the Breivik case, we have other cases in Europe. But actually, in Kosovo and in the Balkans, we have the main violent extremism for the time being, or the prevailing one, is the one which refers falsely to Islam. And we have to make sure that we bring Islamic community on board. We bring the credible imams, even those with a suspicious past, to make sure that we prevent the other part of the society from widespread of further extremism, and if possible to de-radicalize the remaining one. I stop here and I look forward to any comment or question on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And now our third speaker is Ömer Behram Özdemir. He graduated from International Relations Department at Çanakkale 18 Mart University in 2009. He has got his master's degree at International Relations from the Sakarya University in 2012 with the thesis Secessionist Nationalist Movement in Europe, the cases of IRA and ETA. Now he is studying on Middle East at the Sakarya University. He is a PhD candidate. He is going to talk about Turkish foreign fighters in the case of Syria. I think this title is also the ongoing part of ongoing research project at the Sakarya University Middle East Institute under the supervision of Professor Tuncay Kardaş. Now his floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello everyone. As Mr. Yeşiltaş said, I will focus on the Turkish foreign fighters in Syrian civil war. We should start to look at or focus to the foreign fighter issue of the Turkey, not just from the beginning of the Syrian civil war, but from the beginning of the early 20s, because Turkey has a past of the foreign fighter issue, not just limited with PKK, not just limited with the Islamic battalions, but had a different groups, different ideologies, produces foreign fighters like for 14 years in Turkish history. In the 70s, mostly the extremist leftist individuals were known as the foreign fighters, mostly had a coordination with Palestinian Liberation Organization and mostly trained in Lebanon. But how can I say, the most popular issue of modern age, the Islamist foreign fighters issue of Turkey, is started after the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet forces. When we look at the Islamist tradition of the foreign fighters, or the Mujahideen, as we call in the Turkish tradition, or the jihadists in the Western literature, we see several scenarios like the Afghanistan experiment. It has two sides, two phases. First, fight against Afghan invasion. Second, fight against United States invasion. The Bosnia experience, which was the foreign fighters from Turkey joins fights with Bosnians against Serbian invasion. And fight in Ogaden, which is now located between Ethiopia and Somalia, a mostly ethnically Somalian region. And there was also presence of Turkish foreign fighters in 90s. And of course, the fight against Russian forces in Chechnya, another battlefront that Turkish foreign fighters, Turkish citizen foreign fighters, chose to join and fight against another armed groups or armies. And this tradition or history creates some figures, the popular figures that we should know when we are looking for Turkish foreign fighters history. It's like, for example, in Battle of Chechnya, we can see that Cevdet Töger and Serdal Erbaşı, who became commanders, important commanders of the front while they were fighting against Russian army. Selami Yurdan, the first Turkish who was killed in action in Bosnia, which is a popular figure among Turkish foreign fighters, of course the Islamist Turkish foreign fighters. And Bilal Yaldızcı, the first Turkish foreign fighters who was killed in action in Afghanistan against Soviet invasion. These are all the popular figures of the Turkish Islamist foreign fighter tradition. But when we come to our day, our case is the Syrian civil war. When we look at who the Turkish citizens fight in Syria, we have some very different cases from very different ideologies. I will mostly focus on the Islamist groups, but I can say that we see there are many Turkish individuals prefer to join Jabhat al-Nusra, the Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria. Of course, many joins the Islamic State, or as we know, that Daesh. Some other prefers Islamic battalions like Ahrar al-Sham or Kurdish Islamic Front, but also we have Turkish nationalist individuals who prefers to join Turkmen rebels in Idlib, in Latakia, and in Aleppo, and of course pro-PKK individuals who joins YPG inside Syria and a branch of the PKK inside Syria. But when we look at their profiles more deeply, what are their ethnic origins, we mostly see that it's like three sides. We have Turks, ethnically Kurds, and ethnically Zaza people. Mostly the joins foreign fights, joins the Syrian civil war as foreign fighters. When we look at from which cities they mostly joins the Syrian civil war. Of course, metropolitan cities like Istanbul, Ankara are top of the list because of their huge populations, and the cities like Bursa and Konya, bigger cities, industrial cities of Turkey also follow this. But we can observe that some small cities with specific sociological backgrounds are top of the list with their huge presence inside Syrian civil war. Like at the top of the list, we see Adıyaman, and after Adıyaman, it's followed by Bingöl. We see Batman and also Diyarbakır. The common points of these cities are mostly they contain huge Kurdish and Zaza population, they have an undeveloped economy, and they have historical bonds with the cities in Syria, like relatives and the tribal bonds, and of course business bonds like the smuggling tradition and etc. But when we look at the southeastern cities, most as I mentioned, Adıyaman, Bingöl, Batman, and Diyarbakır, we observed a thing that can divide these individuals. Some of them belong to the ethnical Zaza community. For example, the recruits from Adıyaman, the recruits from Bingöl, and recruits from Diyarbakır are mostly from the Zaza community. For example, the recruits from Diyarbakır are mostly the Islamic State. Of course, the Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra recruits from Diyarbakır are mostly coming from Hani town, which is well known with its Zaza population. But we can say that Turks, Kurds, and Zazas are the major ethnic groups of Turkish citizens who fight in Syria, but especially in the Islamic battalions, the Turks and Zazas are the superior actors of these flow of foreign fighters. When we look at the differences between these foreign fighters, because if it's a problem, we should create a solution to problem, but each case has its different has created us different challenges, and to solve each case, we should create different solutions to each cases. For example, Nusra fighters, Nusra's Turkish citizen fighters, are well known with their ideological backgrounds, because Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra has an selective how can I say, method of selection when they are recruiting people to their organizations. You should pass ideological exams, you should pass religious exams, and you have to have some capacities like military capacities or some social media and high-tech capacities. They have strong ideological backgrounds, military skills, and of course the past jihadi experience. When we look at the open source about the late Turkish foreign fighters who were killed in Syria, we see that nearly more than 90% of the experienced foreign fighters, experienced Turkish foreign fighters, prefers Jabhat al-Nusra or other rebellions. But only 1 or 2 individuals we can find from open sources that killed in Syria preferred Islamic State. It's like for the Syrian cases, the most of the past experiments of these fighters are from the Afghan front and the Chechnya. But in the other cases of Turkey, like I mentioned before, the Ogaden case, these fighters who were killed in Ogaden have, most of them have battle experience in the Bosnian front, but we can say that many of the experienced Turkish foreign fighters prefers Jabhat al-Nusra and other Syrian rebellion battalions. They have the Jabhat al-Nusra, among the Jabhat al-Nusra fighters, Turkish citizens are gaining some command posts, like the late Nusra fighters Abu Yusuf al-Turki, who was an elite sniper trainer, was sent from Afghanistan to northern Syria by the Al-Qaeda central commander, and he was killed by the United States airstrikes. But we can observe that many Turkish nationals are among elite sniper units and heavy weapon experts, mostly in Idlib province, and the information we can gain from the sources, the most of these heavy weapon experts are from the Bengal province. And when we look at the Islamic State fighters, the case is a little bit different. They have low military capacity, weaker jihadi past when we compare them to Nusra recruits, and they are being used as cannon fodders by Islamic State command post, and they also prefer to join Islamic State with their families. As I mentioned, if this foreign fighters issue became a national security for all other countries, and like, of course, for the Turkey, these threats that every cases, these threats created by every case is different from each other. For example, the threats of YPG foreign fighters, as we witnessed some examples today, it's easier to face them against Turkish army under the PKK branch. They have the knowledge of urban warfare, which is a result of their experience fight against Islamic State in the northern Syria. And according to the latest report of the Atlantic Council, it's like the 49% of the YPG losses in Syria are Turkish citizens. This is a huge number. They are much more than the Syrian Kurds in the numbers, and it will create it have a potential to create Turkish security and Turkish state, a threat of an experienced urban warfare, which is which can be breed from the fight in Syria. When we look at the Islamic State fighters, potential lone wolf attacks, of course, like the Islamic State commanders, commandship call off for the foreign fighters, the lone wolf terror attacks we can see, the terror cells with coordinations of with Islamic State's commandership, also a threat for Turkey, but also independent attacks might be a threat, because unlike the Jabhat al-Nusra fighters, they have a low disciplined relations with Islamic State center, and as we know that Jabhat al-Nusra as a terrorist organization listed by Turkey, for now didn't directly targets Turkish state in action or in discourse. But when we come to the Nusra cases, we see that there's a high presence of Kurdish Zaza fighters, and it could be create a threat if they decided to fight against PKK in Turkey, because as I mentioned before, they have much more elite fighters with experience of urban warfare and using of heavy weapons like tanks, like mortars and sniper units. But unlike the Islamic State's components, because of there isn't a direct claim of war against Turkey by Jabhat al-Nusra. For now, the Jabhat al-Nusra fighters are not creating same level of threat as Islamic State fighters and YPG fighters. I would love to take your questions after the...
Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. Our last speaker is Iskender Perteshi. He's attending the Master Program in Management in ISES University, whereas his bachelor degree he received in International Relations and Diplomacy at the above-mentioned college. He has been working at the Kosovo Center for Security Studies since 2009, and was author and co-author of several publications related to the security field. Iskender's research interests include integrity in the security sector, defense reform, violent extremism, and radicalism. He's going to talk about Kosovo practices in the prevention of violent extremism and radicalism. Iskender, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to present in this panel. It's my first time in Istanbul. I've used to present in previous time in Ankara and also in SETA events. So, as a phenomenon, the violent extremism is a new phenomenon in the region, in the Western Balkans, and also it was a really big challenge also for society and for the institutions to deal and to address this phenomenon, this level of risk. Because it's a new phenomenon, we usually had a very big challenge even to understand this phenomena. Usually even the society and also the state has put in the same place also the religionization of the society and also the violent extremism. So when we had this case after the conflict which has happened in Syria, when the many citizens from Kosovo have joined this conflict, then we as a state and as a society we try to find the reasons why they joined this conflict, and also to find the difference between the religionization of the society and also the violent extremism. And the violent extremism or the terrorism was also the big challenge also for the West to address. We usually, as society, have deal only with the consequence of the violent extremism, but not with the ideology, with the causes and consequences why the citizens are joining the conflict. For example, in 2001, we had only Al-Qaeda, which has some few thousand of fighters at that time in fighting for their ideology. But what the West did, also they have used the pressure on military equipment to attack this and to defeat Al-Qaeda, which was the wrong approach, because if we see now, we have also many extremist groups and terrorist groups like ISIS, Al-Nusra, Boko Haram, others. So we usually need to redefine our work in prevention of the violent extremism. In Kosovo, the Kosovo authorities have taken some measures to address the phenomenon of violent extremism. They have approved a law which prohibits the Kosovo citizens to engage in the foreign conflict without authorization of the state. And also the Kosovo government has approved the national strategy on prevention of violent extremism. Until now, the Kosovo institutions have arrested more than 130 citizens which were suspected to participate in foreign conflict in Syria and Iraq, and also who have supported and recruited the citizens to join this conflict. I will talk also for some factors which influence somebody to join the conflict. There is no single factor which we may say that is a main factor which influence some person to join the conflicts or to be an extremist. For example, in Kosovo, the religion or the ideology to work to fight to establish the Islamic State, for example, in the Middle East, it was one of the main factors which have influenced Kosovo citizens to go and join the conflicts there. This happens because of the citizens have learned about religion from the wrong imams, which they have the extremist ideology, and then they have influence, and they thought that if they go and fight in Syria, they will help the citizens there and fighters there to establish the Islamic State. Another factor which may influence our citizens to join the conflict was the poor education system, because in the region there is a very poor education system, and the citizens they were not ready to criticize the ideologies which they were influenced by these imams. Also, the isolation, which the Kosovo is the only state in the Western Balkans which they do not have the free visa regime to travel in EU, and also many citizens who have joined the fightings in Syria and Iraq, they were lived in the rural areas, and the first country which they have traveled was Turkey and then Syria. So they have never traveled abroad to see the cultures and other issues. Also, another issue another factor which may influence somebody to join the conflict was also the lack of the trust of the citizens toward the state institutions. For example, the citizens in Kosovo, only 30% of the citizens, they trust Kosovo government and Kosovo institutions, and they are satisfied with the work of the Kosovo institutions. And this lack of the presence of the states among the citizens, it was used very well by the extremist groups to spread their ideology. Another reason why the extremist ideology was spreading in Kosovo is also because of the bad governance. Also, everywhere in the region, I mean, also in Kosovo, there is a bad governance. There are huge challenges regarding the corruption, rule of law, poor economic development, and also missing of rule of law. So these challenges are somehow may have established a very good environment for the extremist groups to spread their ideology. I will talk more about the profile of the Kosovo citizens who have joined the wars in Syria. Usually they are the young citizens between 18 and 26 years old. Majority of our citizens who have joined the conflict, they were young citizens between 18 and 26 years old. They have come from the families without having a tradition on Islam. For example, the majority of these citizens who have joined the conflict, they do not have any tradition in the practicing the Islam. And also they have a lot of lack of information regarding Islam, regarding the religion. So they have learned about religion by the wrong imams, and because of this issue, they suppose that by going into fight in Syria, they will help to establish the Islamic State, and which is completely against the Islam. Also, there are persons who live in a very poor economic situation in Kosovo and everywhere. I mean, and everywhere also in the region. They are usually unemployed. They do not have any sustainable workplace, and also these citizens were marginalized by the society and by the state institutions. Around 40% of these citizens who have joined the conflict in the Middle East, they had a previous criminal background, which these are sourced by the state institutions. And also, as a think tank, we work a lot in the raising awareness among the young citizens in Kosovo and also the students in order to explain them the understanding of violent extremism and the risk of this phenomena, and also we have talked with them to increase awareness of the citizens not to join the conflict in Middle East. We have organized many roundtables in the municipalities which were influenced by the extremist groups and by the extremist ideology, like for example the municipalities which are in the border with Macedonia and also municipalities which are in the border with Serbia. So these regions in Kosovo are influenced the most by the extremist groups and ideologies. And also we have worked with we have organized the debates with high school students in whole municipalities, because these are the young citizens are the main target for the ISIS recruiters and Al-Nusra recruiters to influence these citizens and to recruit them to participate in the conflict in the Middle East. Also, only in 2015, Kosovo police and civil society has prevented more than 35 citizens to join the conflict in the Middle East. They were prevented also in Kosovo, and also they were arrested or prevented in the airport on their routes to join the extremist groups. Yeah, I will finish here. If you have any questions or anything to ask regarding the Kosovo case or Kosovo foreign fighters which have participated in ISIS, I will respond. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you also all the panelists for their invaluable contribution to this panel. I think the panelists are ready for the question, criticism, and your comments. So if you do we have any microphone? Okay. So could you please introduce yourself before the yes. Just it's coming. All right.
My name is Samir Hafiz, and I am from Syria. And I am an activist also on the Syrian case. But I would like to point a question to Mr. Özdemir. Yeah. You are always mentioning about the Turks who are fighting inside Syria as Islamic groups. But nobody is mentioning that who is fighting against in Syria, like Mihraj Ural, which he is really creating a very interesting, very serious problems to both the Syrians and the Turkey and the Turkmens too. And he has really a big efforts doing a lot of things. Why nobody is mentioning these parts and always forgetting to talk about those who are really against the freedom fighters? And we are always talking about those who are few only of them. Meanwhile, I think he is bringing a lot of citizens from Turkey fighting with him against Syrians, Turkmens, and Turkey too. Thank you.
Any question? You can also ask. Türkçe'de sorabilirsiniz arkadaşlar. Çevirebiliriz eğer arzu ederseniz. Any question? No. Okay, there is. All right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My name is Hauki from Indonesia. I am a student here. We have experience in Indonesia. This when terrorists become a jail and prison, it is not effective. There kind of radicalization. For the example, in January, we have after the Istanbul attack, Sarina attack, one of terrorists is before the join terrorists. After that, they cannot the radicalization. I think we make a method how the radicalization can be effective in the term of entrepreneurship, and then maybe we can join the political party, and so on. I think prison is not what we call the solve to the radicalization issue. I think I want to ask
for Professor Tuncay. Your question is for Professor Tuncay.
For Florian.
Cahaya.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and another question?
I'm Dr. Aridi from Syria, a professor at Damascus University.
Something like that.
I have been out of the country for since the uprising in Syria. I don't know whether what I'm going to say is pertinent to the presentations made. However, the heading I see there, the new dynamics of radicalization, is an attractive title. But what I noticed from the presentations made, my point is not being addressed to any particular speaker in particular, but a general statement that I hope could be taken into consideration in, hopefully, future research. What I noticed is that we are looking at the outcome of what is happening in terms of radicalization, rather than looking at the roots, rather than looking at the political strings or political background that exists in creating radicalization, in resulting in radicalization. From a historical perspective, you definitely know as researchers, the West, in particular the United States, seems not to be capable of living without an enemy. There has to be an enemy somewhere, so that it can mobilize, it can activate its economy at different levels. For over half a century, communism was the one, but with the fall of the Eastern Bloc, communism, Islam in general had been selected to be the suitable and nice enemy. So there had to be certain strategies devised, certain techniques, certain tactics that had to be set, that had to be established in order to justify the process of controlling the world. That's the creation of a new enemy, Islam. And research centers all over Europe and in the United States in particular must have worked very hard on creating this particular thing of radicalizing what is not radicalized, making extreme what is normal, what is not a general trend of Islam, all these things. And what we are noticing these days is the extremist case. No wonder why Mr. Obama, for instance, gives himself 15 years, give the United States 15 years so that he can defeat ISIS. Probably this long time needs to be needed in order to enjoy the presence of an enemy through which the world can be controlled. Now, to make, again, a long story short, if I'm boring you, I stop.
Could you please wrap up?
Okay, well, just What we have in Syria is that we have a very cunning regime that was capable of utilizing this particular thing, of creating an enemy which is radicalization or Islam or extremism or terrorism, in order to be capable of labeling or smearing the reputation of its own people through killing them and labeling them or accusing them of being Islamic terrorists. That encouraged and that attracted and that turned into a magnet for inviting radicals, inviting extremists or terrorists from different parts of the world. So we need, again, in short, we need to talk about the roots of a particular thing, this particular phenomenon, before we talk about the outcome that could be misleading sometimes in research.
Thank you very much, your comments. Okay, we have over there. 3 tane oldu değil mi?
Şöyle 4 tane. Soru var yani oradaki.
Tamam, gördüm.
Thank you for your presentations. Bülent Aydın, PhD candidate. I want to say something about scholars. We know scholars has a good position in society, especially they are respectful in society. And how can we use scholars for prevent extremism, also radicalization? Ask to Mr. Kaija.
Who?
Mr. Kaija from Kosovo.
Mr. Kaija. Okay.
What's their role in prevent?
Okay, we got it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Yusuf Salman Inanç from Daily Sabah Center. My question is for both Florian and Iskender. What do you think Turkey and Kosovo, the two countries, can particularly do against extremism? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Yunus Çolak. I am a master student in Yıldız Technical University. And my question will be for Tuncay Kardaş, if you let me. Last week, one of the Turkish nationalist movement party's managers have died in Bayırbucak when he was fighting against Russia and the Assad regime. And my question is that can we identify him as also a radicalist? And if we don't, can we say that terms of radicalism is related with politics, because Russia and the Assad regime will we identify him as a radicalist? And thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Okay, there is a question over there. Nerede? Hani sanki tamam göremedim. Tamam.
My name is Abdurrahman Sarraj from Marmara University. Do you think radicalization can be a direct result of policy failures, both on the macro and the micro level? Government's failures and international communities' failures, maybe government's failures on social policies, and this was obvious by the latest attacks in Europe and the lone wolf scenario. And someone can be just radicalized and join ISIS from thousands of kilometers away. So is it this direct result of government's failures or international communities' failure in solving crises like in Syria? Thank you.
Okay, your question is for
anyone, or for
okay.
Mr. Florian.
Okay, Florian. All right. Okay, there is also another question. Yes.
Thank you all speakers. I'm Ümit Tetik from Sakarya University. I have a question regarding the Iran. And what is the role of Iran in Syria in terms of the military or erratic behavior in terms of the military? Because as you know, there are many foreign fighters who has a erratic behavior? And my second question is, should Turkey have special forces that are responsible to intervene erratic conflicts like, how can I say, YPG or the YPS in south of Turkey? And thank you.
So your question goes to...
For Tuncay Kardeş or Ömer Behram Özdemir.
Okay, Ömer Behram Özdemir. Okay. Okay, so... All right, so we can start, I think it's Professor Tuncay Kardeş and...
Okay. My share of answers is relatively smaller, so maybe I'll be quicker. One direct question was about the person who got involved in Bayır Bucak and got killed in I think it was last week. One of the nationalists, from one of the nationalist ideologies. Well, again, this example that you gave shows that it's difficult to define someone as radical simply because he or she does something out of his own conviction. But if normal boundaries of political action is any criteria, then it's clear that that person was radicalized, in the sense that to take up arms against another country without the consent of your own home country, whose political bonds should otherwise stop you because you're a citizen and because that state is not at war with that state, another state, shows that you are radicalized beyond the confines of political ideology. So nationalism surely is one macro-sociological, if you like, factor behind it. But that doesn't explain why other nationalists do not take up arms against the same regime in Bayır Bucak. So the trouble with the kind of explanation which will say that the reason why that particular person takes up arms against that particular target is because of his ideology, nationalistic ideology, is fragile. It's not really convincing, if you like. As I said, the reason is because there are, literally thousands of nationalists who don't take up arms, who don't go to fight. So underlying that reason is problematic. That's why we should, if we are interested in the reasons why that person is radicalized, we should get beyond ideology as a reason or as a root cause, if you like. Surely it plays a role in, convincing that person to get in that path, radicalized path. But surely it's not the one or the only explanation, if you like. We should look at other motivations, contexts, individual life experience of that person. Okay? So my answer would be that.
Would you like to add something on this case?
But short one, please. Yes, short. No. I think we are recording that, and therefore we need to microphone. But
I would like to let everybody know something very important. In the Treaty of 1921, there was a treaty coming to be in between the French government, which was ruled in Syria, and the new government of Turkey in the time of the new government of Turkey under the president in that time of Mr. Atatürk. Then, prior to the agreement, in about 31 days, the French government cut this part of Bayır Bucak from Antakya and give it to Latakia just because they have been preparing something very different just to let Bayır Bucak get connected to Latakia and then you cannot negotiate anything about it. So there are some Turks from Turkey, they believe that, and we all believe that, Bayır Bucak is part of Turkey. In a very small play come by the French authorities in that time, we lost Bayır Bucak in one day time. And this is why people in Turkey who believes in this can go and protect Bayır and Bucak for this reason only.
Thank you. Okay, Florian.
Thank you for your questions. I will try to answer maybe from the last question and then to go on the question of whether this is whether the violent extremism or radicalization is the failure of the internal politics or the major politics. Of course it is. Internal politics, yes, because on the basis of the characteristics of the people that have managed to be subject to violent extremism, you can find the traces of, you cannot find the traces of the state basically penetrating these zones. You cannot find, you can find a weak educational system in these zones, lack of cultural facilities, lack of sport facilities, isolation, then family isolation, and lack of state social system, proper system. For instance, we have found out cases when people have, the kids have suddenly started to behave differently from their parents, or from the way how their parents did behave 20 years ago. They were marginalized by their parents, and hence lately they were kicked out of their homes, and then they were staying in the certain houses or dormitories, and they were entering the brainwashing machine. So of course it is the failure of the internal and the major politics as well, because of course the Iraq case, when you see, it was partially a failure of the international community on how to deal with the Middle East, and it's still a failure because none of the countries still don't know about how to deal with the situation. We are still debating on how to deal with the Syrian crisis, with the Middle East crisis. As long as we have the Middle East crisis, we will have the potential for violent extremism in our regions. I mean, like when you see historically, there are very few connections between Balkans and, let's say, Syria and Iraq, but because we have now some connections, as long as we will have the crisis in Middle East, we cannot say that we will solve the problem. We can minimize the potential, but we cannot solve. So yes, definitely, that's a very valid question. On the question on Turkey, Kosovo, we think it's essential, and hence we are here, of course, from the academic policy think tank perspective, because Turkey is a kind of gateway for our people going to Syria and Iraq. And when you see there are more contacts between these people and some groups here that were operating in Turkey than directly in these countries. So Turkey is essential for our work in terms of countering violent extremism, and vice versa, because via Turkey some of the recruiters have managed to penetrate the region. And unfortunately, the line from Pristina to Istanbul, we have found out that 90% of people that went as foreign fighters were through the airline from going from Pristina directly to Istanbul. So the question may arise, how about the police cooperation? How about the exchange of information? I believe this is happening, and I think just 10 days ago there was an information post and 2 or 4 people got stopped here in Ataturk.
So are they joining the Daesh or ISIL or
yes
groups?
Yes, and in our case we have about 40% of our people join Jabhat al-Nusra, and the rest Daesh, basically. Yes, but now recently there is a new move that because there is a awareness raising and there is more cooperation, family members do report their sons and daughters. They report to police. So sometimes police get the information at the last minute, and then you find out that the person is in Istanbul, for instance. So you didn't catch that in Kosovo or in Macedonia or whatever. So the cooperation between these two countries is essential. On how to use scholars or academics I think this is also a valid question. This is, namely, the scholars should be used in terms of identifying the causes, in the sense that the scholars, first of all, need to identify the characteristics of the people and to identify the phenomenon, which I said that in the case of our region, we didn't identify until last year. We were saying that everything is about money, that there are a group of people taking money from a certain NGO and they just do it for profit. It turned out not to be the case. It is far, far more complex. And who did that? It's the academics. So our group, like I'm talking at least at our center, it was a group of distinguished academics from political science, security studies, combined with theologists. And I'm saying theologists because we need to speak, we need to have people that speak their language. You know, like the narrative that these people use in these areas is a mixture of some terminology that I do not understand. So we really need to have, you know, like academics. And at the further stage, in terms of communicating with the communities, I think that the role of some academics is also essential, especially sociologists and people that can explain or deconstruct the problems towards the pupils and young population. In terms of the prevention, I have mentioned we don't think that the prison is the ultimate choice. We think that it needs to be, the efforts need to be diversified. There needs to be long-term investments in these communities. There needs to be communication between the state, NGOs, and the communities in all of these areas that I have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ömer.
I first thank you, Mr. Hafiz, to add that these Turkish foreign fighters who are fighting on site with Assad regime. I wasn't sure to add these fighters on my presentation because when we look at these cases, they are much more hidden when we compare them to YPG recruits, Islamic State recruits, and the recruits who join Syrian rebels. When we have contacts with Turkish security sources in Ankara, they are admitting that yes, hundreds of Turkish citizens, some of them from extremist leftist groups, and some of them from some southern states from Turkey joins pro-Assad militias like the one you mentioned, Mehracuras Mukavemet Suriye, or National Defense Forces, or as we know them, the Shabiha gangs, but we don't have some open source intelligence about these Turkish recruits in among Assad regime fronts. Of course, we rarely find some open source intelligence like the recent bounce. There was a guy from Dersim and from an extremist leftist group was killed by Syrian rebels in Syria, and it was used as a propaganda by some leftist groups. And also, as we know that it's a fight of power, maybe not, maybe it's independent from religion or sect, but it became a fight between the identities, and some individuals, Turkish individuals from Hatay, Samandağ, İskenderun, Adana, who are very close to the Bashar Assad's regime in case of the identity, are joining pro-Assad militias, but I didn't add them because I don't have open source intelligence information about them. But yes, they have insights, they have fighting against Syrian rebels inside Syria, mostly in Latakia and Damascus. And second questions, when we look at the foreign fighters issue, the most, how can I say, popular issue is the foreign Sunni fighters mostly, and of course we are talking about Syrian rebels, of course, and unfortunately Islamic State. But as I mentioned, YPG fighters are also foreign fighters, and we have Iranian coordinated foreign fighters inside Syria, and this is, we are talking about huge numbers. Like for now, it's more than 15 or 16,000 Shia militias, sectarian militias fighting against Syrian rebels inside Syria, and they are totally coordinated by the Iranian government. Half of them are fighting in southern Aleppo. You can observe dozens of Shia militias that mostly from Iraq in every day from the southern front of Aleppo, and some of them also Dara, Latakia, and of course Damascus, the capital of Syria. They have a diversity. They are from, some of them from Iraq, the Iraqi militias like Harakat Nujaba, Oliva, Zulfikar. Some of them are Afghan refugees who are living in Iran, are coordinated and trained and sent to Syria by Iran. They are called Fatimian Brigade. Also Hezbollah, as we know, the Lebanon military group, and also Iran not only coordinated and indirectly attack rebels, they are also attacking directly rebels with their IRGC commanders inside Syria, and they are mostly fighting on the fronts of Aleppo, as we know from the open source intelligence that continuously updated IRGC commanders killed in action in rural Aleppo. And yes, we can say that they are feeding foreign fighters' presence in Syria, but I have last to add that it's a little bit different from the Sunni foreign fighters issue, because when we look at the Sunni foreign fighters issue, it's Al-Qaeda, it's Islamic State, or some Syrian rebels. It's like that their motivation and their structure is a little bit different, but when we look at the pro-Assad foreign fighters in Syria, they are mostly coordinated by a Middle Eastern government, and they are much more professional. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, regarding the role of Turkey in prevention of violent extremism in Kosovo, also in cooperation, the violent extremism is international threat, so there is nobody may deal individually with these threats, so there is a need for coordination and cooperation between the states in order to prevent it. Also, there is a need for Turkey and Kosovo police, Kosovo police and other security institutions for better cooperation in order to work on prevention of this violent extremism. Also, what also can do Turkey and Kosovo do in these matters is also to increase the cooperation between think tanks and for the implementation of the research projects in order to build a better counter narratives in order to counter the propaganda of the extremist groups. Also, there is a need for better coordination also between Turkey and Kosovo, I mean, in exchange in research or think tanks in order to build, for better understanding of the phenomenon of the violent extremism.
Okay, I think time is up for the panel. I would like to really thank for coming to our panel, and I would like to really thank our panelists, and my special thanks also for Ms. Pınar Kandemir and Semanur Pekendir from Daily Sabah Center for Policy Studies and Kosovo Center for Security Studies. I thank you, and please join me to applaud all the panelists. Good evening.